I had always been drawn to places where the wild of nature still ruled, places where Mother Nature has not yet been forced to bend to the destructive will of mankind. That's how I found myself hiking deep into Black Hollow National Park, a stretch of unspoiled and extremely remote wilderness that few had dared to explore. The park had its share of local legends. For years, there had been rumors of people disappearing, reports of eerie sounds in the night, and campfire stories of shadowy figures lurking in the trees. I had always mentally rolled my eyes, chalking them up to overactive imaginations or people who wanted attention. That was before I found the cave from hell. I had veered off the main trail around midday, curiosity pulling me down what looked like an old, overgrown footpath winding deeper into the dense woods. The heavy air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. The forest was dark, as the high noon sun could barely cut through the canopy above. It was beautiful. I had been hiking for hours and had yet to see another person. The introvert in me loved every moment, my soul filled with peace and the joy of being alive as the stress of everyday life left my body. This was my heaven on earth. I might never have found the entrance if I hadn't tripped over the exposed root of a gnarled old oak tree, sending me sprawling onto the soft, mossy ground. Cursing, I pushed myself up to a kneeling position as I brushed the dirt and moss off the palms of my hands. It was then that I noticed the dark crevice in the rock wall just beyond where I had fallen. A slit in the earth barely wide enough for a man to slip through, almost entirely hidden by vines and tangled brush. Despite my aversion to tight spaces, my curiosity got the better of me. Getting to my feet, I brushed the remaining dirt and leaves from my clothes. I walked the few steps to the entrance, pushing aside the vines partially obscuring it. If I shimmied in sideways, I figured I could probably fit through the opening. I shined my light into the opening, but could only see a couple of inches into the inky darkness. Against my better judgment, I took a deep breath and squeezed my body through the narrow crevice. The passage was tight at first, my shoulders scraping against the damp stone walls as I cautiously moved forward. However, about 30 feet in, it suddenly opened into a vast chamber, and I realized just how deep this cave system likely ran. Stalactites hung like sharp, jagged teeth from the soaring rock ceiling, giving the impression of a huge wild animal bearing its fangs. Small pools of dark, stagnant water reflected back the beam of my flashlight. The cave's stale air was damp and cold, the chill seeping through my clothing, leaving goosebumps on my skin. But it wasn't the overwhelming size of the cavern that made my breath catch in my throat. It was the overpowering smell. A rancid, cloying stench filled the air, thick and suffocating. It reminded me of something, a petting zoo, maybe, or the rank odor of animals that hadn't bathed in years. I gagged, pulling my shirt up over my nose, and hesitantly took another step forward. That was when I heard it. A sort of clicking sound, deep in the tunnels ahead. A faint whisper followed the clicking noise. Then silence. As I stood there mentally debating my next move, a low rhythmic murmur began reverberating through the cave. Strange, guttural syllables rose and fell like a conversation in a strange language I had never heard before. I froze, heart hammering, senses on high alert. I wasn't alone. A rustling sound to my left made me whip around, my flashlight catching a flicker of movement, a shape skittering back into the shadows, impossibly fast. The beam quivered in my shaking hand as I panned the light across the cavern. The sound of clicking grew louder, coming from all around me now. Then I saw them. They were crouched along the edges of the cave, half hidden in the darkness, their pale, dirty skin blending strangely with the mottled stone. Their bodies were gaunt, sinewy, covered in grime and patches of matted brownish hair. Some of the creatures wore the tattered remnants of clothing, others were naked, their pale, translucent skin stretched tight over their ribs. Their eyes, wide, black, reflecting the light like an animal's, watched me with something between curiosity and hunger. One of them moved, easily unfolding from its crouched position with an eerie fluidity. It took a step toward me, its limbs long and unnatural, its fingers splayed like claws. The creature opened its mouth, revealing jagged yellowed teeth. It made a sound as if speaking to me, a garbled, almost human approximation of speech. More of them stirred, crawling, shifting, their movements somewhere between a man and beast. I took an involuntary step back in horror. The nearest one sniffed the air, cocking its head like a dog scenting prey. The stench was unbearable now, wrapping around me like a living thing. I fought the reflexive urge to gag, feeling I might somehow offend them. There was no question I was in danger, yet I remained frozen in place. My mind screamed at me to run, to get the hell out now, but my legs refused to move. Then, all at once, they rushed me. Adrenaline kicked in, and I turned and bolted. I ran as fast as the uneven stone floor would allow, my flashlight swinging wildly as I did my best not to trip and fall. Bouncing off the slick cave walls, the light beams did a weird imitation of a disco, leaving me feeling disoriented and dizzy. The creatures scrambled over the jagged rocks with ease, their breath coming in ragged huffs as their strange language rose to a fevered crescendo. I could feel them closing in, their fingernails scraping against dampened stone, their hot, rancid breath on the back of my neck. Now, just a few feet away, the entrance was a beacon of light promising safety. I lunged for it, throwing myself through the narrow gap, feeling claw-like hands graze my ankle. I hit the ground hard, rolling onto my back, scrambling to kick away, but they didn't follow. They crouched just inside the cave, peering out at me, their heads tilted at unnatural angles. For a few moments, we just stared at each other. Then the tallest one, its face partially obscured by a thick mat of greasy hair, pressed a long, bony finger to its cracked, pale lips. The unspoken message was unmistakable. It was in my best interest to keep this a secret. Slowly, deliberately, the creature retreated into the darkness. The others followed suit, melting into the shadows as if they had never been there at all. I lay there for what felt like hours, my chest heaving, my skin slick with cold sweat. As my fear faded to nausea, I was left with a pit in my stomach. The woods were silent again. The cave entrance, nothing more than a gaping black maw in the towering wall of rock. I don't know how long I sat there before I finally forced myself to my feet. After a few halting steps, I broke into a panicked run, stumbling over tree roots and rocks without stopping. Though I was certain the danger had passed, I couldn't stop until I reached my truck. Once inside, I drove as fast as I dared until I was miles away from that portal into hell. I never mentioned what I saw. Not to park rangers, not to friends, not to family. But I know one thing for sure. Those creatures in the cave, they weren't animals. They were more like something that used to be human. I don't know when or how or why they changed. I don't know why I feel compelled to keep their secret. Even now, I can't shake the feeling that I was meant to find them. I'm also pretty sure they allowed me to make my escape. Their putrid smell still lingers in my mind, clinging to my memories like rot on a carcass. I often wake in the night to the echo of those guttural whispers, the faintest sound of clicking just beyond the edge of my consciousness. I haven't gone hiking since. I now prefer the safety of the city. The wilderness, the quiet of nature, no longer brings the peace and comfort that it used to. It is the noise and light pollution of the city that brings comfort. I much prefer the hustle and bustle of the concrete jungle to the silence of the forest. I know if I step foot back into that park, they'll come for me. So I stay in the city, but I know I can't hide forever. One day, they'll come looking for me, and somehow they'll know where to find me, and next time, they won't let me leave. I had spent my whole summer hiking the trails of the Daniel Boone National Forest with my best friend Tyler. We knew the park like the back of our hand, every rock, every overlook, every forgotten logging road. We were probably more familiar with the park than most of the rangers. But there was one thing we hadn't explored yet, the caves. We'd heard the rumors. Everyone in town had. Stories about people going missing, hikers who wandered off the trails and never came back. Locals retold the folklore of wild men, feral people who sought shelter in the vast network of caves snaking through the park. Of course, the official story was always the same. It was explained away as a misadventure, an accident, a fall. Tyler and I wanted to see for ourselves. So, on a muggy August afternoon, we packed our flashlights, some beef jerky, bottles of water, and a couple of pocket knives. I also insisted on bringing a length of rope and a small first aid kit, just in case. We set out for a cave we'd found on an old topographic map, deep in the woods, miles away from any marked trail. For nearly 2 hours, we followed along a creek bed, stepping over slick stones and fallen logs. We were about ready to give up when we noticed a jagged opening in the limestone, partially hidden by tangled brush and the gnarled roots of an ancient oak tree. "This is it," I said, grinning as I turned to Tyler. "You ready?" "Tyler, man, what if there's like bears or something?" I rolled my eyes. "Then we get the hell out. Come on, man, don't back out on me now." We ducked inside, our flashlight beams cutting through the darkness. The cave walls felt damp and slick, the stale air thick with the smell of wet stone and earth. The repetitive sound of dripping water echoed all around us as our footsteps crunched against loose gravel. At first, it was just a regular cave, dripping stalactites, sleeping bats, with the distant echo of water somewhere deeper. But then Tyler's flashlight picked up something out of place. Bones. A large pile of them, picked completely clean. Not just deer bones either. Some looked human, skulls with deep gouges in them, jagged, broken rib bones snapped in half as if something had gnawed on them. My stomach twisted in fear as I thought of that old adage, curiosity killed the cat. "Tyler, dude, we should go." I was about to agree when I heard it, a sound from deeper in the cave, a shuffle, a breath, then the faintest murmur of something almost human, but not quite. We froze. The beam of my flashlight flickered briefly, and in that split second of darkness, I swear I heard something move, closer this time. Then suddenly, the darkness wasn't empty anymore. Eyes glinted in the beam of my flashlight, low to the ground, too many of them, watching us. The figures were hunched and pale, their rubbery skin stretched too tight over emaciated frames, lips peeled back over rotted teeth, and long, clawed fingers scraped against the stone as they half crawled, half walked toward us. A sound rose from one of them, something between a snarl and a wet, choking gurgle. Tyler turned and ran. I wasn't far behind, my heart pounding out of my chest. I swore I felt fingers, long, cold fingers, graze the back of my arm as I scrambled out of the cave, launching myself into the safety of the blinding daylight. But the worst part was the noise that followed us, an inhuman screech, full of rage and frustration echoing through the cave and into the surrounding trees. We didn't stop running until we reached the truck, breathless and shaking. Tyler yanked the door open, slammed it behind him, and locked it. My hands fumbled with the keys as I tried to start the engine, terrified that if I looked up, I'd see them blocking our exit. Neither of us spoke on the drive home. Every so often, Tyler would glance at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something following us, or worse, lurking in the bed of the truck. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring blankly at the ceiling, replaying the moment over and over in my mind. The way the shapes had moved, the whispering voices, the way the creatures had appeared, both human-like and inhuman, at the same time. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through articles about missing hikers, strange disappearances. There were too many. I felt sick, knowing I almost became one of them. A few hours past midnight, I swore I heard scratching at my window, a soft, rhythmic tapping, beckoning me. My breath caught in my throat as I reluctantly turned my head to look. Relief flooded through me when I saw nothing there. Just the night, thick and heavy outside my bedroom. I didn't sleep at all. The next morning, Tyler texted me. I stared at the screen for a long time before typing back. We never hiked in that national forest again, and we never, ever went near another cave.